The gate was quiet. Gate 14B at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport looked like every other gate on a Tuesday morning. Plastic seats, tired travelers, a coffee cart with a line that never moved fast enough, a TV screen looping the same weather forecast. Nobody was watching. Normal. Completely, perfectly normal. Until it wasn't. The first officer appeared at 7:42 a.m. Then a second. Then four more came around the corner, moving fast, hands near their belts, eyes scanning the crowd with that specific kind of focus that makes every innocent person suddenly feel guilty. People noticed. A mother pulled her child closer. A businessman lowered his phone. An elderly woman in a red cardigan gripped her purse with both hands and quietly stood up. By 7:44 a.m., there were 12 officers surrounding a single man. One man, sitting in a plastic chair near the window. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't doing anything that would explain what was happening. He was holding a book, a worn paperback copy of The Alchemist with a cracked spine and dog-eared pages. His carry-on bag sat neatly between his feet. His boarding pass was folded in his front pocket. His flight to Washington, D.C. was boarding in 23 minutes. His name was Marcus Webb, 38 years old, quiet, composed, a man who had spent 16 years doing work so classified that most of his own family didn't know what he did for a living. And right now, 12 police officers were surrounding him in front of 200 witnesses, like he was the most dangerous person in the building. He looked up slowly from his book. He did not panic. He did not run. He did not even raise his voice. He looked at the officer closest to him, a large man with a jaw like a cinder block, and said 4 words that nobody at that gate would ever forget. "You're looking at me." He paused. "You should be looking at him." Nobody knew what that meant. Not yet. But 6 minutes later, the Pentagon called the governor of Georgia on a private line. And nothing about that morning would ever be the same again. To understand what happened at Gate 14B, you have to understand Marcus Webb, not the version the news would later invent, not the version the airport security report described. The real man, the one who existed before that Tuesday morning, turned him into a headline. Marcus grew up in Macon, Georgia, third of 5 kids. His father worked double shifts at a processing plant. His mother cleaned offices downtown 3 nights a week and still somehow made it to every single one of school events. He remembered watching her iron her uniform at midnight once, humming softly, completely unbothered, and thinking that if she could carry that much weight without complaining, then so could he. He was not a prodigy. He was not the loudest kid in the room. He was the one who stayed after class to ask questions, the one who read extra chapters. The one who, at 17, wrote a letter to his congressman asking why his neighborhood's school had textbooks that were 14 years old. The congressman never wrote back, but a military recruiter did. Marcus enlisted at 18, not because he had no other options, but because he wanted to serve something bigger than himself. He was quiet about it, didn't announce it, just showed up, did the work, and kept going when others stopped. 16 years later, he was a senior intelligence analyst for a government contractor with clearance levels that required background checks deeper than most people's entire life history. He analyzed threat patterns. He identified coordinated attack signatures. He saw things before they happened. That was his job. Seeing what others missed. He was traveling that Tuesday because he had been called to an urgent briefing in Washington. Something had come up in the threat data. Something that made the people above him nervous. He had received a call at 5 a.m., packed a single bag, and driven to the airport in silence, already running calculations in his mind. He arrived at Gate 14B at 7:31 a.m. He bought a coffee. He found a seat near the window where he could see both the gate entrance and the terminal corridor. Old habit. He never sat with his back to a room. At 7:38 a.m., something caught his eye. Not an officer, not a security guard. A man, sitting 3 rows away, early 30s, plain gray jacket, small backpack on his lap that he hadn't put down since Marcus arrived. His leg bounced constantly. His eyes moved in a specific pattern, not random nervous energy, but a deliberate sweep, checking exits, checking cameras, checking faces. Marcus had seen that pattern before. In reports, in case files, in the behavioral analysis training he completed 4 years ago that most analysts found tedious, and he found absolutely fascinating. He was still watching the man when the first officer appeared, and walked straight toward Marcus. The lead officer's name was Sergeant Dennis Pruitt. He was the kind of man who had never once in his career considered that he might be wrong. Not because he was evil, because he had never been forced to. 16 years on the force, 12 of them at the airport, and his instincts had always been rewarded. His supervisors liked him. His clearance rate looked good on paper. He moved through the world with the absolute confidence of someone who had never paid a real price for a mistake. He approached Marcus with his hand already raised, palm out, before he said a single word. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up slowly and keep your hands visible." Marcus looked up from his book. He did not stand immediately. Not because he was being defiant, because he was processing, counting. There were already 4 officers flanking him on both sides, 2 more positioned near the gate entrance, and 3 behind him. Someone had planned this approach. This wasn't a casual check. "Can I ask what this is about?" Marcus said. His voice was completely level. "Sir, stand up, now." The gate had gone silent. 200 people frozen in place. A child started crying somewhere to the left. The sound of the coffee cart had stopped. The TV was still talking to itself, but nobody was listening anymore. Marcus closed his book carefully, placed it on the seat beside him, stood slowly with both hands visible, exactly as instructed. "I'm going to tell you something important," he said, "and I need you to listen. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. There's a man 3 rows behind you in a gray jacket. Sir, do not make this harder than it needs to be. With a backpack he hasn't put down in 11 minutes. His behavioral pattern is consistent with pre-operational surveillance. I need you to look at him before. Hands behind your back." Last warning. The handcuffs clicked into place at 7:46 a.m. 200 people watched. Several filmed. One person in particular, a 17-year-old girl named Destiny Charles, who was traveling with her grandmother to visit family in D.C., filmed the entire thing on her phone from start to finish without moving a single inch. She didn't post it immediately. She wasn't sure what she had witnessed, but something told her to keep it. As Marcus was walked toward the security office, he turned his head once, toward the man in the gray jacket. The man was already gone. His seat was empty. His backpack was gone. He had walked away in the 30 seconds that 12 officers were focused entirely on a man sitting quietly with a book. Marcus saw the empty seat. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he kept walking, because he understood something that Sergeant Pruitt did not. The clock had just started, and they had already lost 2 minutes. But what happened next would shake the entire security operation to its core. The security holding room at Hartsfield-Jackson was beige and fluorescent and smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Marcus sat across from 2 officers and 1 airport security supervisor named Gerald Owens, a heavy-set man in his 50s who had the look of someone who had processed 1,000 of these situations and expected this one to be over in 20 minutes. "Mr. Webb, can you explain why you were flagged?" "I can't," Marcus said, "because I didn't do anything that warranted being flagged. But I can explain what you should be doing right now instead of talking to me." Owens leaned back. "And what's that?" "Pulling surveillance footage from Gate 14B, specifically the area around rows C and D, starting from 7:31 a.m. There was a man there, gray jacket, small black backpack. He left the moment your officers focused on me." Owens glanced at the officer to his left. A small flicker, not dismissal, something closer to mild interest. "Mr. Webb, you were flagged because—" "I know why I was flagged," Marcus said quietly. "I want you to understand that I'm not arguing about that right now. I'm telling you that while we are sitting in this room, someone who was running a pre-operational surveillance pattern at a domestic departure gate just walked out of your building unchecked." Silence. "I do this for a living," Marcus continued. "I analyze threat signatures. I work under clearance. I can't discuss in this room without the right people present. But I can tell you that what I observed in that man's behavior was not random anxiety. It was structured, deliberate, and the moment your team's attention shifted to me, he moved. Owens picked up his pen, not because he was convinced, but because something in the way Marcus spoke, without panic, without anger, without the performance of innocence, made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't immediately explain. What was his approximate age? Early 30s. Medium build. The jacket was plain gray, no logo. Backpack was black, small, worn on both straps. He was seated in 14C. He arrived after me. He had no food, no phone visible, no reading material. He was watching the gate entrance and the 2 camera positions above the boarding desk. Owens wrote this down. "I'm going to need to verify your credentials," he said. "Call this number." Marcus recited 11 digits from memory. "Tell them Marcus Webb is in secondary at Hartsfield. They'll tell you what you need to know." Owens stared at him. Then he stood up and left the room. He was gone for 4 minutes. When he came back, his face had changed. Not completely, but enough. He sat down slowly. He looked at Marcus differently. Not with apology, but with a careful recalibration of a man who had just been told something that rearranged his morning. "Mr. Webb," he said, "we're pulling the footage now." Marcus nodded. "How long ago did he leave the gate area?" Owens asked. Marcus looked at the clock on the wall. 41 minutes ago, he said. Owens reached for his radio, and then a name came through on that radio that made every person in that room go very still. They had no idea what was hidden in that backpack. While Marcus sat in that holding room, something else was happening. On the other side of the airport, in a glass-walled office overlooking the main terminal, a phone call was being made. The man making it was named Richard Calloway, Deputy Director of Airport Operations. 17 years in the position. A man who knew every camera angle, every security protocol, every pressure point in the building. A man with political connections that stretched from City Hall to the state capitol, and who had spent years carefully constructing a reputation as the toughest, most efficient airport security administrator in the Southeast. He was also a man with a very specific problem, because the flagging of Marcus Webb had not been random. It had been a call, a tip. Someone had contacted the security desk at 7:15 a.m., 27 minutes before Marcus even arrived at the gate, and reported a suspicious black male traveling alone with a large carry-on, acting erratically near the departure gates. The tip had been processed as credible. Sergeant Pruitt had been dispatched. And now, 40 minutes later, the man who had actually been behaving suspiciously was gone. A senior intelligence analyst was sitting in secondary, and Destiny Charles's video was already sitting on a phone that hadn't posted it yet, but would. Calloway knew about the video. He had people watching. He picked up his phone and called someone whose name will matter later. "We have a situation at 14B, he said. "The Webb thing needs to be managed. I need the narrative locked before it leaves the building." The voice on the other end was calm. "What did he do?" "Nothing. That's the problem. We need to make sure that's not what the paperwork says." A pause. "How long do we have?" Calloway looked out at the terminal, at the now empty gate 14B, at the plastic chair where a man had been sitting quietly with a book. "Not long," he said. He was right about that. At that exact moment, Gerald Owens was staring at a surveillance monitor, showing gate 14B at 7:43 a.m., the precise moment all 12 officers moved toward Marcus. And in the background of that footage, perfectly clear, was a man in a gray jacket, standing up, walking calmly toward the terminal corridor. While everyone watched Marcus Webb, Owens rewound it, watched it again, leaned forward, rewound it one more time. Then he picked up his radio and said words that triggered a response he hadn't expected. Within 60 seconds, 2 federal agents he had never seen before were standing in his office doorway. And they weren't there to help Marcus. They were there to control the footage. Then the situation got worse. Destiny Charles was 16 gates away, sitting in a food court with her grandmother, when she finally watched the video back on her phone. She had filmed it on instinct. She wasn't the kind of person who filmed everything. She wasn't looking for content. She was just a 17-year-old who had watched 12 officers surround a man reading a book and felt something wrong in her chest that she couldn't name. She watched it twice. Then she texted her older brother, Damon. "I filmed something at the airport. I don't know if I should post it. Something feels off. Damon Charles was 24, a second-year law student at Emory, and the kind of person who answered texts immediately when they came from his little sister. He called her back in under a minute. Send it to me first, he said. She did. He watched it. He watched it again. Des, he said slowly, don't post this yet. Don't show it to anyone. Don't delete it. Just where you're right now. Still at the airport. Our flight doesn't board for another hour. Okay, I need you to do something for me. I need you to look around and see if anyone is watching you. Not like paranoid. Just notice. Destiny looked up from her phone. There was a man in a suit 2 tables over who had been there when she sat down and hadn't ordered anything. There's a guy, she said quietly. Go to the bathroom with Grandma. Take your phone. Don't leave a phone anywhere. Damon, what is going on? I don't know yet, but that man they arrested, I think he was trying to tell them something. And I think somebody doesn't want that video to exist. Destiny looked at the man in the suit again. He was looking at his own phone, but his coffee was untouched and cold. Okay, she said. I'm going. What Damon did next was the thing that changed the direction of everything. He didn't post a video. He didn't call the news. He did something smarter and quieter and more dangerous to the people trying to control the narrative. He called a professor, Dr. Anita Rowe, constitutional law, former ACLU litigation director, a woman who had spent 30 years making powerful people extremely uncomfortable in courtrooms. She picked up on the second ring. He explained what his sister had filmed. There was a brief silence. Is the video intact? She asked. Yes. Has it been posted anywhere? No. Good. Keep it that way for now. Send it to this email address. Encrypted. She gave him the address. And tell your sister to board her flight normally and act like nothing happened. The worst thing she can do right now is look like she knows something. Does she know something? Damon asked. She filmed something, Dr. Rowe said, which in this country right now is exactly the same thing. Nobody expected what happened next. By hour 8, Marcus had been in the holding room for over 6 hours. He had not been charged. He had not been released. He existed in that gray, bureaucratic space that security facilities use when they don't know what to do with someone but aren't ready to let them go. He had asked for water twice. He had been given 1 small bottle. He had asked for his phone 4 times. He had been denied each time. But Gerald Owens had not forgotten what he saw on that monitor. Owens was not a hero. He was not a crusader. He was a 53-year-old airport security supervisor who liked his job, coached his grandson's little league team on weekends, and had 3 years until retirement. He was not the kind of man who went looking for trouble, but he was the kind of man who, when he saw something wrong, couldn't quite make himself look away. He had watched the footage 11 times. The man in the gray jacket was visible in 16 separate camera frames across a 9-minute window. Owens had mapped his movement manually, old school, on a printed terminal map with a red pen. The pattern was not random. The man had walked the entire Gate 14B corridor twice before settling in row C. He had paused near 2 specific structural columns. The same columns that the airport's maintenance report from 6 months ago had flagged as being near the building's primary ventilation access points. He had checked his phone twice, both times facing away from the cameras, at intervals of exactly 4 minutes. Owen sat back in his chair and looked at what he had drawn. It looked like a rehearsal, not a robbery, not a fight, something methodical, something that required advanced knowledge of the building's layout. He pulled the maintenance access logs for those 2 columns. One of them had been accessed 48 hours earlier. The access badge used belonged to a contract worker whose employment had been terminated 3 weeks ago. Owen stared at that record for a long time. Then he did something that cost him something. He made a copy of everything: the footage frames, the movement map, the maintenance log, the badge record. And he put on a personal USB drive that he slipped into his shirt pocket, because the 2 federal agents who had shown up at his doorway had already asked him to archive the Gate 14B footage under a restricted classification code, which meant it was about to disappear. And Gerald Owens, who was not a hero, who just wanted to make it to retirement, looked at the USB drive in his pocket, and thought about Marcus Webb sitting in a beige room 6 hours after doing nothing wrong. He made a call, not to his supervisor, not to federal agents, to a reporter named Claire Maddox at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who had covered the airport beat for 11 years, and who Owens had spoken to exactly once before, 2 years ago, about a completely unrelated story, and who had given him her direct number and said, "Call me if you ever see something that doesn't add up." She picked up on the third ring. "This is Owens," he said, "from the airport. I need to meet you. Today. Not here." Claire Maddox was already reaching for her coat before he finished the sentence. The next discovery changed everything. At 5:47 p.m., the door to the holding room opened. A different man walked in. Not Pruitt, not Owens. Someone new. Tall, late 40s, dark suit, the kind of posture that came from military service and never fully left. He sat down across from Marcus and placed a business card on the table. Without saying anything, Marcus looked at it. Department of Homeland Security. A name he recognized from briefings. A clearance level that explained the suit and the posture, and the fact that this man had apparently cleared a room full of airport personnel just by showing credentials at the door. "Mr. Webb," the man said, "I'm Agent Cole. I apologize for the delay in getting here." Marcus said nothing. "You've been cooperative and patient, and I want you to know that the situation is being reviewed at a level above this facility." "The man in the gray jacket," Marcus said. "We're aware." "How aware?" Agent Cole paused. "We have his description. We have footage. We have a partial ID from a database cross-reference that came through about 2 hours ago." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Then you know this wasn't random. We're treating it as a serious situation, yes. My flight has been rescheduled. There's a government vehicle waiting to take you directly to D.C. tonight. Your briefing has been moved to tomorrow morning at 0800. Cole slid a folder across the table. "You'll want to review this on the way." Marcus opened it. He read the first page. Then he closed it, because what was in that folder told him that the man in the gray jacket was not acting alone, and the target had not been the airport. The airport had been a distraction, which meant somewhere right now the real operation was still in motion. "How long have you known about this?" Marcus asked. Cole's jaw tightened slightly. Just slightly, but Marcus noticed. "Agent Cole, how long?" The threat pattern was first flagged 14 days ago. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "And the tip that brought those 12 officers to my seat this morning, where did that come from?" Cole didn't answer immediately, which was itself an answer. Marcus stood up, picked up his carry-on bag, his book, his boarding pass that was now useless. "I'll review the file in the car," he said. He walked toward the door. He thought the worst was behind him. He was wrong. They thought the fight was over. He was 40 minutes outside Atlanta when his personal phone finally returned to him in the parking garage, lit up with 17 notifications. Someone had posted a story. Not Destiny's video. Not yet. Something else. A short article, barely 4 paragraphs, published on a mid-tier news aggregation site at 9:14 p.m. Source anonymously. The headline read, "Airport officials confirm suspicious behavior led to detention of Traveler Hartsfield. No charges filed after investigation finds insufficient evidence." 4 paragraphs. Dry, official sounding. Buried in procedural language. But the language mattered. Suspicious behavior. Not mistaken detention. Not wrongful stop. Suspicious behavior that simply didn't rise to the level of charges. Marcus read it twice in the back of the car. He understood immediately what it was. This was the official story. The one being inserted into the record before any other story could take root. Planted quietly, on a site just credible enough to be cited, just obscure enough that most people would never see it. But editors would. Search engines would. Anyone who Googled his name in the next 48 hours would find that paragraph before they found anything else. His phone rang. An unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Webb." A woman's voice. Calm, professional. "My name is Dr. Anita Rowe. I'm a constitutional law professor at Emory, and I have been contacted by someone who has footage of what happened to you this morning. I want to be direct with you. There are people working right now to establish a narrative about today that will follow you professionally and personally for years if it isn't countered immediately. I'd like to help you, but I need to know something first. What? Marcus said. The man you tried to warn them about. Do you know who he is? Silence in the car. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror once, then looked away. I'm starting to, Marcus said carefully. Then we need to move faster than they are, Dr. Rowe said. Because I've been doing this for 30 years, Mr. Webb, and the speed at which this story was shaped tells me that whoever planted that tip this morning is not done. They got what they wanted. They pulled security attention away from the real target. They used you to do it, and now they're cleaning up the edges. You are an edge. Marcus looked out the car window at the dark Georgia highway. What do you need from me? He asked. Everything you know. And whatever is in that folder they gave you. He looked down at the folder in his lap. The folder that contained 14 days of suppressed intelligence. I'll call you back in 1 hour, he said. He hung up. He opened the folder again, and he started reading from the beginning. By the time he reached page 7, his hand had stopped moving. Because on page 7 there was a name, and that name was connected to the man who had placed the anonymous tip to airport security at 7:15 that morning. And that man worked for Richard Calloway. Hope had disappeared, but something was about to surface. Claire Maddox met Gerald Owens at a diner in Decatur at 11 p.m. She was already there when he arrived, laptop open, coffee untouched, the look of a person whose mind was moving faster than her surroundings. Owen sat down across from her and put the USB drive on the table between them. Without saying anything, she looked at it. What's on it? She asked. He told her. She listened without interrupting, which was something Owens had not expected. Reporters usually interrupted. She just listened, both hands around her coffee cup, eyes steady on him, until he was done. Then she said, the 2 agents who came to collect the footage. Did they show you a court order? No. Did they show you any documentation at all? A federal ID. That's not a legal basis for evidence seizure, she said flatly. That footage is still public infrastructure. They can classify it, but they need paperwork to do it properly, which means if they moved fast and sloppy, and it sounds like they did, there may be a chain of custody issue. She picked up the USB drive. I need to have these files authenticated, she said. I can't publish anything based on unverified copies. I know. Owens looked at his coffee. I'm not asking you to publish anything tonight. I'm asking you to hold this somewhere safe while I figure out if I still have a job tomorrow. She looked at him carefully. Owens, the man they detained this morning, Marcus Webb. Do you know who he is? He told me to call a number. The number was real. That's all I know. He's a senior intelligence analyst. He's been involved in 2 major domestic threat assessments in the last 4 years. He doesn't have a public profile because his work is classified, but I've been sitting here for 2 hours doing background, and what I can tell you is that a man with his credentials doesn't get flagged randomly at an airport. Owens was quiet. Someone set him up, he said. It wasn't a question. Someone needed security looking one direction. Claire said. He was the magnet. She opened her laptop and turned it toward him. On the screen was a property record, a name next to a shell company. A shell company connected to a private security consulting firm, a firm with 1 major government contract, issued through the Atlanta Airport Authority, issued and approved by Richard Calloway, the man in the gray jacket. Owen said slowly, may have been working for someone who knew exactly how airport security protocols work. Claire finished. Because someone who helped design them told him. The diner was quiet. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. I have 3 years until retirement, Owen said. I know, Claire said. I have a grandson. I know that too. They sat with that for a moment. Then Owens looked at the USB drive in her hand. Make it count, he said. She closed her hand around it. I will. The next move would decide everything. 48 hours after 12 officers surrounded a man reading a book at Gate 14B. 3 things happened in the space of 6 hours that could not be stopped. The first was Destiny's video. Dr. Rowe had advised holding it. Claire Maddox had advised releasing it at exactly the right moment. That moment arrived at 6 a.m. on Thursday when the Atlanta Journal-Constitution published Claire's story. Not a blog post, not a tweet. A full documented, source-investigated piece with authenticated surveillance frame captures, maintenance log records, badge access data, and a statement from a named source inside airport security. The headline read, "Airport security detained intelligence analyst while real threat walked free. Internal records raise questions about who called the tip." Destiny's video went up 30 minutes later, shared first by Damon's Law School network, then by Dr. Rowe's professional contacts, then by 3 national journalists who had already read the AJC piece and were waiting for something to anchor it visually. By 8 a.m. it had 4 million views. By 9 a.m. it had 12. The second thing that happened was Marcus Webb. He had spent 47 hours in D.C. briefings that he could not discuss publicly. But at 9:30 a.m. on Thursday, he walked out of a federal building on Constitution Avenue and stood in front of exactly 9 journalists. Not a press conference, not a prepared statement. Just 9 people with cameras and recorders, and he spoke for 4 minutes. He did not perform anger. He did not cry. He did not ask for sympathy. He said, "I want to be clear about what happened and what didn't happen. I was detained. I was not harmed. I told the officers what I observed, and they were not able to act on it in time. That is a systems failure, not a personal one. I have worked in national security for 16 years. I understand that security personnel make decisions quickly under pressure, and sometimes those decisions are shaped by factors that have nothing to do with actual threat assessment. What I want people to understand is that while I was in handcuffs, the person I flagged walked out of that building. That is the story. That is what needs to be examined." He paused. "And I want whoever made that anonymous tip to airport security at 7:15 a.m. on Tuesday morning to understand something. I have spent my entire career studying how coordinated operations are constructed. I know what I saw in that folder. I know what the maintenance logs mean. And I am not an edge that gets cleaned up quietly." He answered no questions. He walked back inside. The third thing that happened was Richard Calloway. At 10:15 a.m., federal investigators executed a search warrant at the airport operations office. 2 hours later, a second warrant was executed at the private security consulting firm connected to Calloway's shell company. By 2 p.m., Calloway had retained a criminal defense attorney and was no longer returning calls from the mayor's office, the governor's office, or the 4 airport authority board members who had been texting him since 8 a.m. The man in the gray jacket, whose partial ID from the database cross-reference had by now been fully resolved, was apprehended at a bus station in Birmingham, Alabama at 11:43 a.m. In his possession was a backpack containing equipment consistent with ventilation system interference. The same ventilation access points that Marcus had noted. The same columns that Owens had mapped with his red pen. The operation had been real. The distraction had worked for 47 hours. It had not worked for 48. At 3 p.m., the Pentagon confirmed in a brief statement that a potential infrastructure threat at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport had been neutralized, and an ongoing federal investigation was underway. The statement did not name Marcus Webb. It didn't need to. By then, the whole country knew his name. And at Gate 14B, which had been closed for 2 days while investigators worked, a cleaning crew found something wedged behind a plastic seat near the window. A worn paperback copy of The Alchemist, dog-eared pages, cracked spine, left behind in the chaos of a Tuesday morning. Someone from the cleaning crew set it on the lost and found counter. It sat there for exactly 1 day before someone came to claim it. Richard Calloway was indicted on 4 federal counts, including obstruction, conspiracy, and misuse of security infrastructure. His trial date was set for the following spring. He maintained his innocence through his attorney and did not make public statements. Sergeant Dennis Pruitt was not charged with any crime. He was placed on administrative review. In the internal investigation that followed, he cooperated fully in his written statement. He said that he had followed the tip as reported and acted within protocol. He was not wrong about that. The protocol, investigators found, had been specifically exploited because someone knew exactly how it worked. Gerald Owens kept his job. He was formally thanked in a closed federal briefing that he was not allowed to discuss publicly. He coached his grandson's Little League team the following Saturday and did not mention any of it. Destiny Charles was invited to speak at a youth civic leadership conference 3 months later. She spoke for 11 minutes about what it means to film something when you don't yet understand what you're seeing. She said the most important thing she did was not post immediately. She said waiting felt like doing nothing. She said it was actually the most powerful thing she did. Dr. Anita Rowe filed a civil rights complaint on behalf of Marcus Webb that was settled quietly within 60 days. The terms were not disclosed. She described it afterward as a beginning, not an ending. Claire Maddox's story won a Regional Investigative Journalism Award. She donated the prize money to a fund supporting whistleblower legal protection. She thanked Gerald Owens in her acceptance speech. She did not use his name. And Marcus Webb, he went back to work. Not immediately. He took 2 weeks. He drove down to Macon and sat on his mother's porch and drank sweet tea and watched her iron her uniform and hum softly, completely unbothered, the same way she had when he was 17 years old. He did not tell her everything that happened. She didn't need the details. She looked at him across the porch one evening as the sun went down over the neighbor's oak tree and said, "You still standing?" He looked at her. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once, like that was sufficient. Like that was, in fact, everything. He flew back to Washington on a Monday morning. He arrived at the airport early. He found a seat near the window where he could see both the gate entrance and the terminal corridor. He pulled a book from his bag, a new copy of The Alchemist. He opened it to the first page, and he began to read. Some people see danger and look away. Some people see danger and freeze. Marcus Webb saw danger, told the truth, paid the price, and kept his eyes open. That is not a small thing. That is everything.